Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that everything you thought was solid in this world of money was smoke. Your pension fund? Gone. Your life savings? Evaporated. The too big to fail companies the media worshipped for years? Dead in a weekend. And the most terrifying part? All the warning signs were there. Everyone just chose to look away. In this video, we're going to walk through the autopsy of 4 legendary corporate disasters: Enron, Lehman Brothers, FTX, and WeWork. For different eras, for different industries, but one repeating pattern. They all played with reality and lost. Enron was once called the most innovative company in America. Behind the scenes, it was a castle made of fake numbers and creative accounting tricks. People kept buying the story, right up until the stock price hit zero. Lehman Brothers? A 158-year-old financial giant. Politicians, bankers, and investors were sure it could never collapse, until one Monday morning in 2008, when the world learned a new phrase: global financial crisis. Trillions in value wiped out, because one bank rolled the dice too many times with toxic debt. Fast forward, FTX was supposed to be the grown-up face of crypto. Stadiums, celebrities, politicians, everyone lined up behind it. The founder was hailed as a genius who would change finance forever. Then, overnight, we found out there were no real safeguards, no proper accounting, and billions in customer funds were simply gone. And then there's WeWork. Not a tech company, not a revolutionary AI, just offices. But with the right buzzwords and a charismatic founder, it was inflated to a $47 billion fantasy. Investors weren't buying desks, they were buying a dream. A dream that collapsed the moment someone asked a simple question. Wait, where's the profit? So what actually happened here? Were these just freak accidents? Bad luck? Evil masterminds? Or is there a system, a formula, that keeps creating these disasters over and over again? Because if you strip away the logos, the PR, and the headlines, you find the same core story repeating. Hype grows faster than reality. Numbers become more important than truth. Leaders start to believe their own lies. And ordinary people are left holding the bag. This video is not just about corporations exploding. It's about how bubbles are built, how trust is weaponized, and how easy it is to destroy billions when no one wants to ask hard questions. By the end, you'll see that these aren't just stories about Enron, Lehman, FTX, or WeWork. They're a warning. Because right now, somewhere out there, the next can't-fail company is already being built on the same fragile foundation. And if you can recognize the pattern early, you might be one of the few who steps aside before everything collapses. Let's start with the first corpse on the table: Enron, the company that turned accounting into a weapon. Imagine a company so admired that employees tattooed its logo on their bodies. A company praised by every major financial magazine. A company politicians pointed to as the future of American capitalism. Now imagine that same company collapsing so violently that its executives were led away in handcuffs. Its employees lost everything, and its name became a global synonym for corporate fraud. That company was Enron, and its downfall wasn't an accident. It was a masterclass in deception. For years, Enron was the golden child of Wall Street. It reinvented itself from a simple energy supplier into a high-tech trading empire. They claimed they could predict energy prices, outsmart the markets, and create new financial products no one had ever seen. Journalists called it the smartest guys in the room. Investors called it unstoppable. Employees called it a family. But in reality, Enron was building its empire on a foundation of lies, carefully engineered, beautifully packaged, and ruthlessly executed. The core of the fraud was something called mark-to-market accounting. Here's how it worked. Enron would sign a long-term contract, maybe a 10-year energy deal, and on day one, they would report all the future expected profits as today's revenue. Not money they actually earned, not cash in hand, just a guess, a fantasy. If the contract later lost money, Enron simply hid the losses. To keep hiding them, they created a network of secret subsidiaries, shell companies with confusing names like LJM, Chuco, and Raptors. These entities were designed for one purpose: to bury Enron's debt where no investor, no auditor, and sometimes not even their own employees could see it. The man orchestrating this financial maze was CFO Andrew Fastow, a genius of manipulation who engineered deals so complex that even Wall Street's best analysts were fooled. He wasn't just hiding losses. He was profiting from them personally by running some of these shadow entities himself. But Enron's collapse wasn't only about accounting tricks. It was also a story about culture, a culture that rewarded aggression, punished honesty, and worshipped risk. Employees were pushed to hit impossible revenue targets. If they didn't, they were fired. If they cheated to make the numbers look good, they were promoted. Inside Enron's offices, image was everything. Reality was optional. Meanwhile, executives cashed out millions in stock options, even as internal documents showed the company was bleeding. Employees, encouraged to invest their retirement savings into Enron stock, were locked out from selling as the share price collapsed. In the final month, insiders sold over $1 billion worth of stock, while telling the public everything was fine. By December 2001, the truth finally surfaced. The shell companies imploded. The debt could no longer be hidden, and the world watched as a $74 billion corporate titan fell to zero. Thousands lost their jobs. Entire pensions were erased. Auditing giant Arthur Andersen collapsed alongside Enron after being caught shredding documents to protect their client. Enron wasn't just a scandal. It was a turning point for modern capitalism because it exposed a brutal truth. When a company's success depends on believing the story instead of seeing the numbers, collapse is only a matter of time. And if Enron was the warning shot, Lehman Brothers would become the financial earthquake felt around the world. Let's move to the next fallen giant. Lehman Brothers was not just a bank. It was an institution woven into the very fabric of global finance. Founded in 1850, it survived the Civil War, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and countless recessions. For more than a century and a half, Lehman represented stability, tradition, and the quiet confidence of American capitalism. That is what made its collapse in 2008 so devastating. It signaled not just the failure of a company, but the failure of an entire system built on unchecked risk and blind faith. To understand the fall of Lehman Brothers, you have to understand the world leading up to it. In the early 2000s, the United States entered a period of booming real estate prices. Houses seemed to rise in value endlessly, and banks began offering mortgages to nearly anyone. Even people with no income proof, no stable employment, and no credit history. These became known as subprime mortgages, and they were the financial equivalent of lighting a fuse in a room full of dynamite. But these toxic loans didn't sit on the bank's balance sheets for long. Institutions like Lehman discovered they could bundle thousands of mortgages together, slice them into investment products called mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations, and sell them to investors all over the world. Ratings agencies, hungry for business, stamped many of these products with AAA ratings, the same rating given to the safest government bonds. In essence, Wall Street took piles of risky, unstable loans and disguised them as premium assets. Lehman Brothers became one of the most aggressive participants in this game. By 2007, their mortgage exposure had ballooned to hundreds of billions of dollars. The bank wasn't just buying these products, it was creating them, betting on them, and using them as collateral for even more borrowing. Lehman's leverage ratio, the amount of money it borrowed compared to what it actually owned, rose to an astonishing 30-to-1. That meant for every $1 Lehman had, it borrowed $30 more. A tiny drop in asset value could wipe them out instantly. When housing prices began to fall in 2007, the entire illusion started cracking. Mortgage defaults surged. The supposedly safe assets began losing value. Creditors grew nervous. Hedge funds pulled their money out. Overnight lending markets froze. Lehman desperately tried to raise capital, seeking buyers who could absorb its losses. Talks with potential saviors, including Korea Development Bank and Barclays, broke down. The U.S. government, scarred by the political backlash of the Bear Stearns bailout earlier that year, refused to step in again. By September 2008, Lehman had run out of lifelines. On September 15th, it filed for bankruptcy, the largest bankruptcy filing in American history, with over $600 billion in assets. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Markets around the world plummeted. Banks stopped lending to each other. Companies couldn't access credit to pay employees or keep operations running. Consumers panicked. The collapse triggered a chain reaction that spiraled into the global financial crisis, a crisis that destroyed trillions in household wealth, wiped out retirement funds, led to millions of job losses, and forced governments worldwide to launch massive rescue programs to prevent a total economic collapse. In the months that followed, investigations revealed the full extent of the risk-taking, mismanagement, and denial inside Lehman. Executives ignored internal warnings. Accounting tricks, like Repo 105, temporarily hid billions in debt to make the company appear healthier than it was. The culture rewarded short-term profits, even at the cost of long-term survival. Lehman Brothers didn't fall because of one bad decision. It fell because of a decade of reckless behavior, fueled by a system that rewarded greed and punished caution. It fell because everyone believed the good times would last forever. And it fell because no one, from regulators to investors to executives, wanted to imagine that a giant like Lehman could collapse. But collapse it did, and the world paid the price. With Enron, we witnessed corporate deception. With Lehman, we witnessed systemic failure. Next, we move into a different type of disaster, one born not on Wall Street, but in the new world of cryptocurrency, the rise and implosion of FTX. FTX was supposed to be the moment crypto finally entered the mainstream. A sleek, professional-looking exchange with celebrity endorsements, naming rights to arenas, partnerships with major sports leagues, political influence, and a CEO the media described as a once-in-a-generation genius. For many people, FTX represented the future of finance, fast, modern, transparent, and far more efficient than the old banking system. But behind that polished image was chaos, deception, and a series of decisions so reckless that they ultimately triggered one of the biggest financial collapses of the 21st century. FTX was founded in 2019 by Sam Bankman-Fried, known everywhere simply as SBF. He cultivated an image unlike any other billionaire in history. Messy hair, wrinkled t-shirts, cargo shorts, sleeping on beanbags, gaming during interviews, and speaking about altruism while running a multi-billion-dollar empire. Reporters loved him. Politicians loved him. Investors adored him. But the reality was far from the carefully marketed persona. Internally, FTX was run more like a college dorm than a financial institution. Key decisions were made through group chats. There was no proper accounting department. Financial records were incomplete or non-existent. Billions of dollars moved at SBF's personal discretion, often with no documentation. And the company's executives, including the head of its trading arm, Alameda Research, lived together in a luxury penthouse in the Bahamas, mixing work, relationships, and money into one volatile environment. The heart of the disaster was the relationship between FTX and Alameda Research. While FTX presented itself as a neutral, safe exchange, Alameda was actively trading, speculating, and losing enormous amounts of money. In a properly run financial system, these two entities would be strictly separated. At FTX, they were essentially the same organization. When Alameda's bets started going bad, and they did, repeatedly, SBF quietly began using customer funds from FTX to cover their losses. This was not a small breach. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate transfer of billions in user deposits, without permission, for speculative trading. In traditional finance, this alone would be criminal. In the crypto world, where trust is the only currency, it was catastrophic. For a long time, no one noticed. FTX was protected by hype, by celebrity endorsements, and by SBF's growing political influence. He donated heavily to campaigns, advised lawmakers on crypto regulation, and presented himself as the industry's responsible leader. This gave FTX an aura of legitimacy that discouraged scrutiny. But in November 2022, everything unraveled. A leaked balance sheet revealed that Alameda's finances were built largely on FTT, a token created and printed by FTX itself. In other words, the company's stability depended on assets it had essentially invented out of thin air. When Binance, a rival exchange, publicly questioned the value of FTT and announced it would sell its holdings, panic spread. The price of FTT collapsed. Customers rushed to withdraw their funds. And within 48 hours, it became clear that FTX no longer had the money to give them back. What followed was a complete and total implosion. FTX froze withdrawals. Executives attempted last-minute rescue deals. SBF insisted everything was fine, even as internal Slack messages showed he knew the company was bankrupt. Then, in the span of a single weekend, a multi-billion-dollar empire collapsed into dust. When investigators entered the scene, what they found was staggering. Over $9 billion in customer deposits missing, zero financial controls, loans to executives worth hundreds of millions, luxury real estate bought with company money, private jets, political donations, and speculative investments paid for with user funds. The new CEO brought in to clean up the mess, the same man who handled the Enron bankruptcy, said FTX was the worst case of corporate controls I've ever seen. Coming from someone who oversaw Enron's wreckage, that statement is chilling. FTX didn't collapse because of crypto volatility. It collapsed because of fraud, mismanagement, and a culture built on the belief that rules do not apply to people who claim to be visionaries. Where Enron showed the danger of manipulation, and Lehman exposed the danger of systemic risk, FTX revealed something new, that in the digital age, trust can evaporate in seconds, and when it does, even the biggest empires collapse instantly. Next, we move to a very different story of destruction, one built not on fraud or toxic assets, but on hype, charisma, and the illusion of infinite growth, the rise and fall of WeWork. WeWork's story is different from Enron, Lehman, and FTX because it wasn't built on accounting tricks or missing billions. It was built on something far more subtle, a dream. A dream that modern work could be reinvented, that offices could feel like lifestyle brands, and that one company could reshape the way humanity works, lives, and even thinks. At least, that's what WeWork's founder, Adam Neumann, convinced the world to believe. For a while, it worked spectacularly. Venture capitalists poured money into the company at a pace no real estate business had ever seen. In just a few years, WeWork wasn't just a startup. It was a global phenomenon valued at an unimaginable $47 billion. But behind the smoke and mirrors was a very simple truth. WeWork was leasing long-term office space, decorating it nicely, and renting it out short-term. It was not revolutionary. It was not technology. It was real estate, a notoriously slow, expensive, and risky business model dressed up in tech clothing. The engine behind the company's rise was Adam Neumann's charisma. Investors described him as magnetic, visionary, and fearless. He talked not just about office spaces, but about elevating human consciousness. He claimed WeWork would change cities, societies, and even entire ecosystems. In pitch meetings, he spoke with the certainty of a prophet. Many investors, including massive firms like SoftBank, didn't just give him money, they gave him blind faith. What made WeWork so fragile was the company's obsession with growth over sustainability. Instead of building profitable centers slowly, it expanded at breakneck speed. WeWork signed massive long-term leases in some of the world's most expensive cities, spending billions of dollars before a single customer even walked through the door. Every new location meant more debt, more obligations, and more financial risk. Inside the company, the culture was equally chaotic. Former employees described WeWork as a place where partying, drinking, impulsive decisions, and extravagant spending were part of daily life. Neumann himself became infamous for his unpredictable behavior. He made decisions on a whim, traveled by private jets, purchased luxury properties, and even trademarked the word "we," which he then attempted to sell back to his own company for millions. By 2019, SoftBank's massive investments gave WeWork momentum, but they also inflated the company far beyond what its fundamentals could justify. The pressure for an IPO grew, and when WeWork finally filed its paperwork, the truth spilled into the open. The IPO prospectus revealed astronomical losses, erratic spending, conflicts of interest, Neumann's personal loans taken from the company, governance structures that gave him near dictatorial control, a valuation that made no financial sense. Investors recoiled. Analysts mocked the numbers. Journalists uncovered more and more troubling details. Within weeks, the $47 billion valuation collapsed like a house of cards. The IPO was canceled. WeWork ran out of cash almost immediately. Neumann was forced to resign, walking away with a golden parachute worth hundreds of millions, even as employees lost jobs and investors lost billions. Without the hype holding it together, WeWork's business model was exposed for what it truly was: high-risk real estate dressed up in tech slogans. The company tried restructuring, downsizing, rebranding, anything to survive. But in 2023, it finally filed for bankruptcy. A global symbol of infinite growth was reduced to a cautionary tale about believing in dreams without looking at numbers. WeWork didn't collapse because it was fraudulent. It collapsed because it was delusional, a company sustained by storytelling rather than profitability. Investors didn't just buy office space, they bought a narrative. And when that narrative cracked, the entire empire fell. If Enron was the story of lies, Lehman the story of systemic risk, and FTX the story of reckless trust, then WeWork is the story of how hype can become more dangerous than fraud itself. Next, we'll tie all these collapses together and reveal the pattern they all share, the blueprint of failure that keeps repeating throughout history. Throughout these four corporate disasters, Enron, Lehman Brothers, FTX, and WeWork, a striking truth emerges. Despite operating in different industries, different decades, and under different regulatory systems, they all followed the same underlying formula for collapse. A pattern so consistent that it begins to look less like coincidence and more like a blueprint. A silent architecture of failure that keeps reappearing whenever ambition, pressure, and unchecked power collide. To understand why these companies truly fell, we need to strip away the logos, the personalities, and the headlines, and look directly at the repeating mechanism beneath them. At the center of every collapse is the same starting point: growth that outpaces reality. Enron grew faster than its actual profits. Lehman grew faster than the stability of its assets. FTX grew faster than its internal controls. WeWork grew faster than its business model could support. In each case, the numbers demanded constant expansion, constant excitement, constant narrative fuel. The moment growth slowed, the illusion cracked, so leaders became desperate to keep the momentum going, even if it meant distorting the truth. The second shared element is the weaponization of complexity. Enron used incomprehensible accounting structures and off-balance sheet entities. Lehman relied on financial instruments so layered and opaque that even professionals barely understood them. FTX created a maze of interlinked companies, no accounting transparency, and insider privileges. WeWork used spiritual language and visionary storytelling to distract from simple, unprofitable math. Complexity isn't an accident in these stories, it's a strategy. When the truth is dangerous, confusion becomes a shield. The more complicated the systems, the easier it is to hide losses, risks, and structural weaknesses. Third, every collapse shares a cult of personality. Jeff Skilling and Andrew Fastow at Enron projected intellectual superiority. Dick Fuld at Lehman operated with an iron ego that refused to admit weakness. Sam Bankman-Fried became a celebrity visionary in crypto. Adam Neumann became a Silicon Valley prophet selling utopia. In each case, the leader's charisma, confidence, or mythology disarmed critics and attracted unlimited trust. Investors, journalists, and even regulators hesitated to question people they believed were extraordinary. The leader became the brand, and when the brand took precedence over the business, accountability vanished. Fourth, we see internal cultures that punished honesty and rewarded illusion. Enron's employees were pressured to meet impossible revenue targets. Lehman rewarded traders who made risky bets rather than those who managed responsibly. FTX operated like a private playground where rules were optional. WeWork encouraged magical thinking, reckless spending, and blind loyalty. Inside these companies, the truth was considered a nuisance. Bad news was suppressed. Caution was mocked. Success became a performance, not a measurement. But perhaps the most important shared element is this: all four collapses depended on trust that eventually evaporated. Enron needed investors to trust its imaginary profits. Lehman needed lenders to trust its mortgages. FTX needed customers to trust their deposits were safe. WeWork needed investors to trust in its story. The moment that trust cracked, sometimes in a single day, the entire structure fell instantly. These companies did not die slowly. They imploded because their foundations weren't made of capital or assets or strategy. Their foundations were made of belief. And belief is the most fragile currency in business. Finally, every collapse reveals a broader systemic flaw. When rewards are tied to growth instead of stability, deception becomes tempting, then necessary, then inevitable. Executives became millionaires by maintaining illusions. Investors ignored red flags because they were profiting. Banks, auditors, and regulators failed because they were either complicit or complacent. In the end, the pattern is simple. Hype, leverage, complexity, denial, collapse. For companies, for different eras, but one identical trajectory. This shared formula is not just history, it continues today. Somewhere right now, a company is repeating the same story. Unrealistic growth, charismatic leadership, complex structures hiding simple problems, and a market eager to believe what it wants to be true. Understanding this pattern isn't about judging the past. It's about recognizing the future before it happens. Because the next great collapse will not look new. It will look familiar, almost predictable, following the exact same blueprint we've just uncovered. In the next section, we'll explore the psychology behind why millions of investors, and sometimes entire nations, fall for these illusions again and again. Human beings like to believe we are rational, logical creatures who make decisions by analyzing facts, weighing risks, and choosing the safest path. But the history of Enron, Lehman Brothers, FTX, and WeWork exposes a far more uncomfortable truth. People don't invest in numbers, they invest in stories. And stories, unlike spreadsheets, are emotional, contagious, and dangerously persuasive. To understand why these corporate disasters grew so large, we must understand the psychology that sustained them. Because none of these collapses were possible without millions of people willingly, even enthusiastically, believing in illusions. At the heart of this psychology is a simple force, FOMO, the fear of missing out. Investors saw early adopters make huge gains and assumed the trend would never reverse. In the late 1990s, Enron looked like the future of energy. In the early 2000s, Lehman looked like the engine of endless prosperity. In the 2010s, WeWork looked like a rocket ship to a new kind of urban lifestyle. In the early 2020s, FTX looked like the gateway to the crypto revolution. Wherever people saw others making money, they rushed in, not because the fundamentals were sound, but because the idea of staying on the sidelines felt unbearable. This is why hype is such a powerful weapon. A charismatic CEO, an exciting mission, a narrative of disruption. These elements bypass analytical thinking and speak directly to emotion. Adam Neumann talked about elevating the world's consciousness. Sam Bankman-Fried talked about effective altruism and saving humanity. Enron's executives talked about reinventing capitalism. Lehman traders talked about creating financial products so sophisticated they were rewriting the rules. The message in every case was the same. This isn't just a company, it's a movement. And people desperately wanted to be part of something groundbreaking. Another psychological factor is the illusion of safety in numbers. When everyone is investing in something, it feels safe, even if it isn't. This is how bubbles form. Everyone believes Enron is innovative. They must know something I don't. Every major bank is in mortgage-backed securities. They can't all be wrong. All the big funds trust SBF. He must be legitimate. SoftBank is putting billions into WeWork. How could the valuation possibly be fake? People confuse popularity with legitimacy. The more crowded the train becomes, the more confident everyone feels, even if the train is heading toward a cliff. Then there's the authority effect, our natural tendency to trust experts, celebrities, or institutions without questioning them. Enron had prestigious auditors and glowing media coverage. Lehman had legendary Wall Street status. FTX had endorsements from athletes, actors, and politicians. WeWork had SoftBank, one of the most powerful investment forces in the world. When respected figures validate something, it removes the psychological burden of critical thinking. If the experts approve, why should the average person worry? Another key psychological mechanism is confirmation bias, our instinct to seek information that supports what we already want to believe. Once investors decided WeWork was the next big thing, every article praising its innovation became proof. Every photograph of crowded WeWork offices reinforced the belief that the model worked. Every interview with SBF made people believe FTX was the future. Meanwhile, red flags were ignored or dismissed as temporary setbacks. But perhaps the most powerful psychological force behind these collapses is the seduction of narrative simplicity. People love clear stories, heroes, villains, breakthroughs, revolutions, visionary geniuses, unstoppable growth. Reality is complicated, but a good story is irresistible. So investors embrace narratives like, Enron cracked the code of energy markets. Housing prices never go down. Crypto exchanges run by geniuses can't fail. WeWork is building the future of cities. These weren't financial theses. They were fantasies, comforting, exciting, and easy to understand. Finally, there is the sunk cost fallacy. Once people invest time, money, and belief into something, they resist backing out, even when signs of danger appear. Investors held Enron stock even as rumors spread. Hedge funds kept buying mortgage debt even as foreclosure rates rose. Traders left billions on FTX even when competitors warned of instability. Employees stayed loyal to WeWork long after its flaws were obvious. The deeper the commitment, the harder it becomes to walk away, and the more catastrophic the eventual collapse. All of this reveals a difficult truth. Financial disasters are not just economic failures. They are psychological failures. They happen because people want to believe in something. They want to feel smart, early, visionary, part of a movement. They want shortcuts to wealth, certainty, and meaning. And until people learn to question their own instincts, not just the companies they invest in, these disasters will continue to repeat themselves. In the next section, we'll explore how the economic environment itself encourages these psychological traps and enables even the most fragile bubbles to expand until they finally explode. When you look at Enron, Lehman Brothers, FTX, and WeWork side by side, one truth becomes obvious. These collapses weren't random. They were built on the same human flaws, the same incentives, and the same illusions repeating across decades. And if these stories teach us anything, it's that nothing collapses suddenly. It collapses slowly, then all at once. Each disaster began with ambition, not fraud from the start, but the desire to grow faster than reality allowed. Companies wanted to be legends. Leaders believed they were building the future. Investors refused to miss out. The system rewarded speed, not stability. Over time, ambition became entitlement. Executives stopped asking whether something was wise, only whether it was possible. Enron hid losses behind accounting tricks. Lehman pushed leverage into fantasy. FTX moved billions casually, assuming genius replaces regulation. WeWork expanded worldwide without proving a single profitable model. These weren't failures of intelligence. They were failures of humility. Behind every collapse was a collective refusal to face reality. Employees ignored inconsistencies. Investors ignored losses. Regulators ignored warnings. The public ignored red flags. Everyone believed growth meant safety, momentum meant strength, and hype meant truth. Until it didn't. The most unsettling truth is this. Our system rewards the exact behaviors that lead to disaster. Aggressive expansion gets headlines. Risk-taking attracts capital. Complexity hides flaws. Charisma raises billions. And visionary narratives spread faster than facts. As long as these incentives remain, collapses are not accidents. They are inevitable. These failures reveal something deeper about human nature. We crave certainty in an uncertain world. We want shortcuts, heroes, revolutions, and stories that promise a brighter future. And when a charismatic leader speaks the right language, technological utopia, financial innovation, spiritual mission, skepticism fades. The real challenge isn't preventing collapses. That's impossible. The challenge is recognizing the warning signs early. Growth that defies logic. Leaders who demand loyalty, not accountability. Business models built on perfection. Numbers that look magical. Complexity used as a shield. Cultures where questions are punished. When these appear, collapse is only a matter of time. So here is the final lesson. The greatest risk isn't choosing the wrong company. The greatest risk is believing collapses only happen elsewhere, to other industries, other people, other eras. Because the truth is simple. The next Enron already exists. The next Lehman is being built. The next FTX is gaining followers right now. The next WeWork is pitching a dream in some boardroom today. History doesn't repeat, but human behavior does. Unless we learn to question narratives, confront illusions, and demand transparency, billion-dollar empires will keep rising on borrowed confidence and collapsing on borrowed time. Final message. These 4 stories are warnings, signals from the past pointing straight into the future. The power lies not in remembering their names, but in recognizing their patterns so that when the next miracle company appears, you can see whether it's true brilliance or the beginning of another beautifully packaged lie.